I'm here with Jesse, and he's going to tell us about home birth experiences from a dad's perspective and kind of your journey on learning about natural birth.
Mm-hmm.
So what you were just saying now about what was important for you to be learning.
Sure. I mean, I think for me, what really, if I walk back through my experiences, I didn't know much at all about natural birth. I didn't understand, like many people, I was influenced by maybe movies or whatever, but I really hadn't taken interest in trying to understand it until Courtney was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so a big part of my process was, I wouldn't say reluctantly, but being a good partner participating in that process. Courtney wanted to go to like a Bradley method class. So it was, as a lot of people know, there's educational options. And so we went down that path. And it was through that process that I really learned how women have a choice and how important it is to support them, and how our medical institutions were failing them. If you were to consider interventions, if you were to consider just things that would be comfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really my learning process through the first birth, was being exposed to this alternate method and the support mechanisms there, with midwives, with doulas, with birth assistants. So I would just say that was kind of my initial reaction was, wow, there's a lot here I don't know. I went from not knowing anything and a preconceived idea about things to actually seeing what it was like to have. We watched live births. So I felt
as part of the class, or just separately?
No, just separate from that. And there we were encouraged to check some things out. Like that curriculum is focused enough to where that person needs to stay focused on. There's some parameters around it, and we knew to go outside of that to also get some other stories. But for me, I learned about water birth, knew nothing about it. Really understood about I feel like I learned a little bit more about the anatomy, what to expect. But I think at first you learn there's a lot of things you can do to help the woman in birth. Mm-hmm. Courtney used me as a beanpole the whole time. So that's how I was able to be there. I was like a physical pillow support system.
Okay.
And that was my job, was to be there wherever they wanted me, however I could be there. But I definitely think I was a source of comfort to her. She was holding my hand. Mm-hmm. But I think in all that I learned, like my actual experiences with the births were very positive. But the first one was like, I was in awe of it. Because I saw how out of control the woman is in that. Like, this is literally something that happens, that you experience. You go through it. Yep. And so when I watch like the whole ab stack, the abdominal, go through a contraction, I'm like, you would need a huge amount of electricity to recreate that power. Yep. There's no way Courtney just went, like that. Yeah. Like the body takes over. And so learning to work through that. And so I could appreciate that. And I didn't like making a lot of analogies to this, because I think it diminished really the birth experience, because I'm not trying to compare apples to apples, but I have experience with endurance. I have experience with being exhausted and going through that process. And you could see the resources being depleted through that process. And so
through the birth as well?
Through the birth as well. And so understanding, she's going through this. And then eventually there's transition. There's going to be stages where it's asking the most out of you. Mm-hmm. But again, I saw Courtney's strength and power through that process. And so to me it was beautiful. I understand it was also very difficult for her, but like I think any woman that has a positive experience would come through and tell you about that too. Mm-hmm. Why would they have more and more children? Like it's a very special experience. So, but for me it was about learning what I could do. And then when it came to actual birth, I had a lot less to do than was on the table before, and that would have been good to know too. Like if you're a midwife and you're a birth assistant, they're like, we'll tell you what to do. And that's really helpful as a man. Just tell me what to do. I can receive orders very well in this moment. But my job was about comforting Courtney, whatever she needed. It was nothing more than that. So I liked that I had a role to play, but I also liked that I wasn't really having to, all my concerns were really handled by the team. So that was different.
So you were very comfortable with the team that you had chosen for your family?
I was comfortable because of their protocol. We had many engagements, as you would expect, like check-ins, and I just think I got to know everybody. And we met with different people, so you didn't actually know, because Jackson came a month early, we had a different team show up to some degree.
Okay.
There were 2 different people there that were not part of like the original plan, and that was totally okay.
So they have a team for each window of like.
Well, it was kind of a who's available now moment, right?
Okay.
You know, this is happening now. You know,
Okay.
so and Courtney, everybody knew that because of her mother, there's a possibility of a quicker birth.
Okay.
And it wasn't like. It was 4 hours, but it still was like the train had to get moving. People had to get their kids places. So
Yep.
I thought they had that all really thought out well, but I think we just had a phenomenal team. And it was unique because we also we were kind of like an educational arm for them in a way. We allowed in somebody that wanted to become a midwife that was a birth assistant, additional person there. So I think we had 4 people there, including Courtney. So that was pretty awesome.
So you felt well supported?
Felt super supported. Okay. Felt like... What I felt like is the people that we chose to work with, again, the midwives and doulas, understand the needs from the angle I was learning about. And so I felt like I got led into. Now, the Bradley course was totally on the side, but I think that was very informative the first time. I don't think I need to go through that again to get the gist of what's going on, nor did we need to the second time. But I still made every meeting with the midwife the second time around too. And thank goodness, because Kieran came in 2 hours.
Yep.
And that was fascinating. And like, so you learn some things like Courtney's hesitancy to call the birth assistant / doula in this case, because she thought it was too early. And I'm like, if you really trust yourself, if you're concerned, we call her right now. That's what we're paying them for.
Yeah.
Come to the house.
Yeah.
So she comes, and the birth assistant in that case delivered Kieran right before the midwife got there.
Yeah.
Midwife, but it was her contraction. I heard her contraction and her like deep kind of, like this is taking over, that oh yeah. And I'm like, whoa. I was filling up the birth tub, and I'm like, we're way further along. If I remember correctly, this is not far away from like really getting down to business. So
that's amazing you remembered the sounds as well. Like you could tell just from the one other experience.
And it was just one sound, and so I would describe it as work. She was working.
Okay.
You know, and so I think that was important. Yeah. So I felt like super well supported, but again, to your point of how prepared I was very unprepared, but I think I was willing to learn, and I found that there was a ton to digest.
Unprepared, but when she got pregnant, but not necessarily unprepared for the birth.
In the end, I felt totally comfortable, other than the fact you need to go through it once to experience it, and the second time I didn't have to buy into any of like her work she needed to deal with and her concerns. It was all about knowing her. And in Courtney's case, she's reluctant to get encouragement. Like she needs encouragement, but won't ask for it. So it's identifying, what does my spouse really, really need? And after that first one, I'm learning that, and you ask them again, what is it that you want? And she isn't going to ask for that encouragement, but she fuels off that. You know, we tried to have a setting. We went for our second water birth that didn't work out. We were going to have music, you know, nice music that could be planned. That didn't happen. But we had an environment. Like when you're at home, you know kind of where you want to be. You got to be prepared for anything. And but you know, for us, we were fortunate to kind of be where we wanted to be. So that was probably one of the biggest decisions, and have the help with the people that we trusted to do that. Yeah.
So by the time you had both births, you were fully comfortable. Did you find there was something that, like, you mentioned needing to buy into it. Was there something that really switched your mind about it, or you were like, yes, this is the way I want to go? Or
it wasn't a buy-in would imply, and I might use the wrong term there, that I needed to be convinced of it. It wasn't that way. It was an unlearning of preconceived ideas, and a realization that why wouldn't every woman want this? And I think they're scared of the birth getting out of control for them. It's too much. You know, what's pain, right? Pain's relative. And I think that if you really listen to women that understand this, that's not the language that you'd probably use to describe it, right? It's definitely work, and it can be probably very painful. But again, it's your body doing a lot of work too, and you working with it. So that's a unique thing to describe. That never really bothered me. I'm comfortable with trauma. Maybe some people aren't, things like that. So I was more just trying to learn I learned all about why is this good for Courtney? And why would you go to a hospital environment? And there's some scenarios where that's appropriate.
Yeah.
There's midwives, any person you work with, they're going to have their limits on what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
You know,
and what they're trained for as well.
Yeah, right. And breech scenarios, some are comfortable, some aren't. So you just got to know where your plan B and plan C is. And we didn't have the hospital planned out like we could have, but I knew Courtney was against certain interventions. So I would have fought for that, but I would have also expected the midwife. So those conversations were there even though we didn't have a plan. And then in the second case, again, we always had a plan B. We acknowledged that the hospital had its place for us in certain situations. That's where we were going to go.
Okay.
And so we found that, but for the most part, we were really hoping that we could do it at home. And so I'm all over the place, but really what I learned out of that is what a great choice. I totally understand why you'd want to do this, and I'm all for it. You know?
Were you always, or was there apprehension about doing the home birth?
No, I didn't have apprehension about it, because that's what Courtney wanted. So I guess some people might have, there's a lot of things that I would feel more strongly about, but when it came to this, like, it's Courtney's body, and it's me here to support it. And so I didn't think that the hospital was going to have something that you couldn't have at home. In my mind, I'm thinking a lot about the birth, but there's so much to what's my body doing now? Is this okay? I'm concerned about this, like whether it be from spotting to gaining weight to am I eating right? How's my diet? I'm uncomfortable. Something's changed. Physically, I'm feeling things happen. Eventually, you're feeling the baby moving, which has got to be otherworldly, in your body, things like that. But then it's also recovery. And I think that's the thing I really loved the most was when Courtney was at home, 3 hours later, everybody's gone. And this is to protocol. Like, there's nothing wrong with this. And we had friends there, but it was like eerie. It was like, we're home. We have a baby. It reminds me of people that came home from the hospital and set the baby down. They're like, now what do we do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the job the first week after the birth was keeping Courtney upstairs. So that 1 week window, in my opinion, if you can be off of work, I was off of work that week, and we then had family. So like I staggered my time off, because I needed to be working for us. But that first week, you really get into the reality of if there was ever a time you appreciate your wife for what they do, you now have to do everything around the house. And so it was just making sure she had food, she was comfortable, and call in on your friends and family if you can do it. But like, she snuck down like 4 or 5 days in, and I called that a victory, right? The idea is just to rest and recover, and then have those checkups. So I thought the recovery was optimal. At home, baby could be on breast all the time. If you're feeding, baby was on chest with me right away. It's it's just an elegant, natural experience, like kind of what you'd expect. And then in the second time, it was the same thing. It's like, keep her up there as long as she's not going to fight you. To rest, stay focused on yourself. And then.
And how did you know that was important to do for the postpartum period?
I was convinced it was important because of my own experience with endurance events. I know exactly what it's like.
Just for context.
For context, I do long course triathlons, so it's these full day triathlons. I've done endurance running, so I understand what it means to deplete my resources to a point where I will not be recovered the next day, or the day after that, or the day after that. Like, I've done damage to my body in excess of what should be allowed. Like, you've depleted your glycogen stores, your muscles are shot. So it's in a period of time where it needs to repair. And birth is going to be a sprinting version of that. Like, I just imagine it like in a very short period of time, or whether it takes you 48 hours to do a birth, you will exhaust your resources. I don't know of anybody that comes out of that probably that has not exhausted their resources. Like, that's fresh. So what do? You give your body time to fuel, to repair. And then there's other practical matters with the birth. You're looking at how's bleeding, or is there anything else you need to deal with there. But that's what I mean by that, is that your body needs rest. And if you really want to care for your baby, if you really want to be present, the more attention you give to that your first week. So that already was in my mind, but then I did it with her, and I saw that be beneficial. I don't know what it would have been like if she would have tried to walk out a day later and do stuff, but it takes time to get back to normal. I don't know how long it takes, but it would take some time.
It depends on everybody, but you have an appreciation for that, and giving her that space, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
And
that's
you.
it's just happenstance, but I would share that with everybody and I don't think anybody would have a problem with it. Again, like, this is about understanding a point of view and taking the time to listen to it and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense. You know, if you get one-on-one with people, you can help them understand things, but they're not going to just think about it and know if they haven't experienced it. So,
yeah, definitely.
So I do think I had some experiences that allowed me to imagine what might be happening some in your body.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then you had like being apprehensive or anything like that. Like, my anxiety had to do with emergency scenarios. I think I told you about that before.
I think most parents and most new parents, that's the case.
So again, I'm okay with trauma. I understand that things can happen and things could go terribly bad, but that it's in the minority of scenarios. But for some reason, for me, I wanted to know what are those scenarios. I wanted to know what we had a plan for that, and I wanted to just kind of demystify what might happen, so that one, I probably have a better chance of having a cool head. Okay. I already have a disposition towards that in trauma. I've been in it, so I can know that. But this is my wife. This is my newborn child. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like that's definitely different. So what I asked about were things like, if the baby isn't breathing, what are we doing? Well, in our cases, we had oxygen with us. And it's a very common thing for lungs to possibly be underdeveloped in early birth, like Jackson, for males. Yep. So they told me that. I wasn't going to be surprised if they got him on oxygen. I wasn't going to be surprised if he had a little trouble, like getting his first breaths going and things like that. With the water birth, or even the baby coming out, I knew that it could be up to a minute and totally normal before they're having, or it might even be different now. I don't want to prescribe what I feel like I learned that there was a period of time that seemed abnormal to me that was perfectly normal for the baby to take first breaths. So I needed to know that. But the most powerful thing that I needed was the first time, because I was prepared going through the first time. The second time, I knew we were going to the hospital if something came up. But the first time, we had to make a decision of, he's a month early. Is the midwife comfortable, yes or no? Before we knew that, we might really be going to the hospital, which we hadn't prepared for. So fully. So I was trying to prep Courtney for that, because I'm like, this is a really big 180 from where we're at. And I have a very hard time helping her feel comfortable in that environment. Her mind's been somewhere else, but she now had this conflict of what's best for the baby. So when the midwife said, I'm comfortable, I know you really well, I've done an exam, this baby's over 6 pounds for sure in my mind, which was amazing, because it was. He was, yeah. I'm comfortable delivering at home if you are. So that became a debate. And what I uncovered through that conversation from my own mind was, what's the worst that happens here? Okay. And the worst that happened was, obviously you can know the worst case scenario, but like, if we need to go to the hospital for anything that we do not feel we can handle here, we have to call an ambulance. Okay, woo-woo, comes to the door. Can you handle that? Like, can you free yourself up to that reality? Sure. Then we're going to the very hospital that we would have gone to the first time. But for the minor 1% or even less percent chance that we would end up at that hospital, 99% chance we can be at home like you wanted to be. Right? Okay. And so that was the position. You felt the risk was relative. I thought it was most important to be at home, because everybody has those risks, or no matter where you are, so why not try to be at home? And we felt fully, the staff we had, like, they're professionals. The midwives, they're pros. It's a very natural thing, but you're a pro. So I felt like they knew everything they needed to know by asking those questions. Like, they had answers. It wasn't like, oh, I'm not really sure. Like, in the moment, they're going to have to make different decisions, and that's what you trust them with. So for me, once that was kind of understood, I was able to make decisions or make peace with things and move back on to, let's just focus on, if that happens, we'll deal with it when it happens, but for the most part, let's just focus.
So it gave you some, like, you contemplated all of the scenarios a bit, as much as you could beforehand.
And then put it away. And I know, like, you mentioned people that deal with anxiety and stuff. I don't know if that matters to them, but for me, that took away anxiety for me. Because I saw the plan. And it would have been, it could be a very difficult situation to go through, but I knew that, risk reward was that, hey, let's be here. And I really thought about it. I thought about being on another floor of a hospital and them deciding they want to bring the baby to like a NICU or emergent, like move them somewhere else because something's going wrong.
Yeah.
Like that whole thing would take as long as it takes to get to the hospital in some instances.
Okay.
So like I just didn't understand where the real added value was for what Courtney's intent was, which was to birth at home.
Okay.
And if we were fortunate, we didn't have situations, right? And so we got the full benefit of that decision of being at home, you know.
Yeah, amazing.
So we're going to have positive stories because that's what our experience was, you know. And Courtney definitely, I'm sure, would express difficulty still at birthing and having her body go through adjustments. So that's a different topic, right? Like me, I'm talking maybe globally of like it was a generally good process.
Yeah. But the outcome you desired.
Yeah. Yep.
So is there anything that you would advise to fathers to look into or to really keep in mind? You know, what would you want? What are the top couple things you'd want fathers to know?
Well, I'm going to make a assumption that the father cares enough to make an effort, right? Okay. But what do you do then, right? And if Courtney wouldn't have convinced me or wasn't interested in doing a Bradley class, I don't think I would have got that. Between that and like the office visits was a really nice compliment because I was kind of applying what I was learning. So I don't know if you can just go read a book. I think if you can invest in somebody that's thought about training related to a couple's experience through the birthing process, if you can get that information somehow, it's worth it if you care, because there's a lot to know. There's a lot to consider. Yeah. And a 101 of that, however you get it, if that analogy works for people, you know, just an overview, I would suggest to invest in that somehow, because it changed things for me.
Was it helpful then to hear the perspective from somebody else other than your wife? Yeah.
And in our case, we were with other couples expecting, but inevitably they had heard things. Like, so you're kind of validating like good or bad information, right? And there's a lot of decisions to be made. Some people agree or disagree, and we were totally comfortable with people taking completely different approaches than us. So you just learn that there's a lot to this, and you can kind of figure out that you're comfortable. But if you care, I guess is what I'm saying, is that figuring out how to invest in time and then make all the appointments. So I don't think there's anything else. I just, I'm glad, all I can say is I'm glad that however our journey worked, that I learned about natural birth, I learned about the support systems for it, that even if I was busy, I stayed committed to learning with Courtney, and I don't regret any of it. And now we have 2 healthy kids, and learning to be a parent's about, you know, that's a whole nother journey, so we might as well get ready for it. Yeah, so I'm grateful for that there was an option that we were able to birth at home.
Great. Well, thanks so much for sharing, Jesse.
Of course.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
You're welcome.